We have really just one topic in front of us for today's meeting, which is an update on the comprehensive plan. But before we did that, I thought we should probably take some time and acknowledge our newest members of the Planning Commission. And I will let them introduce themselves. But before they do that, I would say that I had the pleasure of meeting with Andrea, Kim, and Sandra, was it just last week? Last week, we spent almost 2 hours together doing a pretty thorough introduction and orientation to their roles and duties as a planning commissioner, covering things like the comprehensive plan or zoning code and your bylaws, and amongst other things, conflicts of interest and basic ethical obligations of the job. So wanted to share that with you all. I did also want to just note, so Andrea is joining you as the first alternate role. Sandra is joining as the second alternate role, and as you guys may recall, that also means that they will serve as zoning board of appeals members should there be a case that comes forth to that end, and they would serve in that role accompanied by your chairman Teskey, who fills out that 3-member board. And then Kim Kirk will be replacing Bill Wade's position coming the 1st of November. So she's technically not a seated planning commissioner yet, but didn't want to invite her to join, especially this conversation today on the comprehensive plan. So with that, maybe we'll start just in the order of what I've got on my screen here. Is maybe Andrea, you could give it maybe a brief introduction of yourself.
Sure, thank you. Well, hello everybody. Nice to meet you all virtually. So my name is Andrea Heitz. I am actually a native of Colorado, only lived in the Midwest for 4 years while my husband attended graduate school, and then we came back because we wanted to raise our family here. I am a real estate agent. I've been doing that for almost 14 years now, do that full time. 3 kiddos that keep me busy as well. And been married to my husband, Greg, over 20 years now, so he puts up with me. My parents joke that they pay him off every year to keep me their hair. So we have a good relationship. No, we like to have fun. I'm just excited to give back. That's why I wanted to volunteer for the commission, just being a part of Grand Junction really my whole life. I love this area. I love what we have to offer. And so now that the kids are getting older and things like that, it's just a great opportunity to be able to see how I can learn more about our community and then also give back at the same time. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Kim, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I know I've met some of you. I'm Kim Kirk. I have a local planning and development office here in Grand Junction. I've been self-employed in this industry for about 3.5 years. And prior to that, did the planning and development for Blue Star Construction for almost 12 years. So it's an industry I'm really involved in, that I really enjoy, and I have a lot of contacts and a lot of information in that industry in Grand Junction, which is exciting. And I thought this would be such a great opportunity for me. Well, really a win-win, where I could learn so much from being on this commission. Just meeting with Tamara and Jamie last week, I got, gathered so much information that I think it's just going to be a really great learning experience for me. And hopefully I can share some of my experiences with you. And I think it's an exciting time to be involved in development in Grand Junction, and really look forward to this.
Thank you, Kim. Sandra?
Oh, I'm Sandra Weckerley, and I am the general manager of the Redlands Mesa Golf Course and their restaurant up there. And how I came to that even was my husband and I've been in the construction world so as long as I know. My dad was, my whole family was. And then my husband and I got married like 23, 24 years ago, and have been in real estate development ever since then. And we've really specialized in golf course residential communities for our real estate development. He's been working out here at the Redlands Mesa Golf Course for almost 10 years now. And so we eventually, eventually that led me into my job that I have now as the general manager out there. So we still do a lot of real estate development around town. We have some different stuff we do on our own, and then some out here at the golf course also. So the Planning Commission is just a perfect fit for me. I love being on boards. I was really involved in education and some really charter school education reform when I was out on the Front Range. I've lived here 4 years now. And this is where we plan on, it's where we chose to move to, and it's where we planned on ending up. So now I just decided, after being here for 4 years, I'm super anxious to get involved with the city and the community and really give to where I can. And the Planning Commission's a good fit for me since I've just been in this business for so long, and I understand the gist of the business. I don't obviously understand all that the city and the staff does, and I have a lot of respect for that. But so I'm excited to serve on this committee. So thanks.
Well, thank you guys for that. I'll turn to our chairman to see if he has anything to add or want to discuss before we jump into the comprehensive plan. But as I noted, it had a very great conversation last week with all three of the new members, and thanks to Jamie, who joined us in that training session and orientation session as well. But like I said, really quite excited to work with you all. Certainly joining, I think, a very well-rounded and very thoughtful and knowledgeable set of planning commissioners that we currently have. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Tamara. Nothing more from me. Obviously echo your thoughts about our new folks. Welcome them here and look forward to working with them as we move forward.
Excellent. So with no further ado, we really wanted to take today to kind of reorient you to the comprehensive planning process that we have been in for quite some time. We have, well, I should say originally we had slated this for the joint workshop with City Council a week and a half ago, but weren't able to do that. The conversations on marijuana and regulated land use was a compelling discussion point for many. So we are wanting to cover some of the comp plan and really just bring you guys up to speed with where we're at, but also really want to highlight some of the kind of major themes or ideas behind, especially the land use portions of the plan. Dave and I are going to tag team this a little bit, but I wanted to do a little introduction, and then Dave will do kind of a more formal presentation and systematically walk you guys through what we have for a draft plan. But I wanted to take a moment and reflect a little bit, and Dave can add in here too, but you know, we spent a fair bit of last year really working with our public and really actively outreaching engagement through a variety of means, certainly the more standard means, which was the very significant and well-attended series of public open houses and meetings. So we had, I believe, 4 of those last year. A couple of those focused on kind of broader vision and goals. One focused more on the initial one on kind of issues and opportunities. We also focused on the sub areas towards the end of the year, working hand in hand with the advisory committee. The Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee met throughout the year last year on that plan document and into early this year, really up until about mid-March, where that CPAC had seen, and unfortunately Keith is not with us, but she is the representative from the Planning Commission on that advisory committee, but met with them and reviewed the draft future land use map at that point in time, had worked through the visions and goals sections of the plan. We hit a couple roadblocks, if you will, this spring, maybe some of them very obvious to you guys, but really took a pause over the course of late spring, early summer on the plan and the outreach, and also spent a fair bit of time kind of retooling what we had received as an initial draft at the very end of April of last year. So we've been working hand in hand with our consultants very actively throughout the summer, and have finally prepared and have just released out to the CPAC, actually as of yesterday at the end of the day, that new draft document plan. So we're very excited about that. And the CPAC is in a position now where they'll spend approximately 2 weeks reviewing that plan and providing back feedback and comments to us. So it's probably a little unorthodox to be sharing all of the kind of contents of a draft plan at this point in time with the Planning Commission. We're not going through the entire document, and we're not publishing that document yet until we actually have distilled the comments back from the CPAC. However, we really did want to share some of the big picture concepts with you today. And you also, I believe, in the packet of information received all of the plan principles that really make up a lot of the meat of the plan, and then talk a little bit about the land use related components of the plan as well. So with that, unless there's any questions, I'll turn it over to Dave, who actually has a formal presentation to walk you guys through today. Dave, you are on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Ken. Thanks for joining us.
So I'm trying to share the screen. It's not letting me. Is Bella on the line? If she could give me permission.
She is. I can go snag her here too.
Hold on one second.
Oh.
While we're waiting, just congratulations to Andrea, Kim, and Sandra. I'm excited for you, and I hope you enjoy the Planning Commission as much as those that have been on it for a while. I think they all really enjoy their posts as Planning Commissioners.
Excellent. And for those that aren't talking, perhaps we can use a couple tools on this Zoom if you have questions. I think Dave will give you guys liberty to stop and interrupt if you have questions, but if you can use the, I believe it's the hand tool, although I'm not actually seeing it right now.
Are you
So
seeing
if you
my?
take, we're not. I was going to say, if you take yourself off of mute, if you want to ask a question, we will keep an eye out for that symbol change there. And then that also means that if you're not talking or want to talk, if you could just keep yourself on mute, that would be much appreciated.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, I'm assuming you can. Yeah, if there's a question, Tam, that you see pop up, let me know. Otherwise, I'll listen in as far as anybody might interrupt. And that is okay if you want to interrupt, and we can stop and answer questions. So to begin with, I wanted to give a little bit of a orientation to the plan and how it's laid out.
Hey, Dave, I'm going to interrupt.
Sure.
Are you intending to share your screen? It's still not up.
Oh, okay, hold on. Can you see it now? Okay, great. I can see I hear now. I can see at least a few of you if you nod your head. I know you can hear me. Perfect. So just to begin with, I wanted to give a short orientation to how the plan's laid out, which is, I think, is useful, and it kind of gives you an overview of what you might find in the plan from a 30,000-foot level. So the plan has 6 chapters. Chapter 1 is an introduction. It presents the purpose of the comprehensive plan, how it should be used and updated, key factors in its development and its organization. As listed here on the slide, the introduction addresses these topic areas. You can see about the comprehensive plan, number 1, all the way down through plan amendments and updates. So it looks at lots of the planning process, engagement by the public, the various parts of the plan, and the relationship with the comprehensive plan and our zoning code and our municipal code. That's chapter 1. Chapter 2 has the 11 plan principles that guide the community to reach its potential, its vision. These are those that we vetted with you in March. not only you as a planning commission, but also the CPAC. And they were also presented kind of as a courtesy to Mesa County Planning Commission as I met with them at one of their workshops. And they were well received there as well. In the plan, each of the plan principles looks at where we are today, then asks the question, where are we going? That question, where are we going, is the vision for Grand Junction. And it is written as if it is 20 years from now and looks at how we are doing in 2040. This is done for each specific plan principle for all 11 of them. In each plan principle section, the plan then asks, how will we get there? Here is where the goals are established and a list of strategies are identified. Here, text is written with many strategies that will help Grand Junction in its growth and realize its vision. These strategies begin with action words such as cultivate, support, promote, identify, ensure, increase, incentivize, and many others. An example of this is under the plan principle number 5, strong neighborhoods and housing choices. Goal 4 reads, quote, promote the integration of transportation mode choices into existing and new neighborhoods, end quote. One of the strategies for that goal reads, quote, neighborhood connections. Connect new and existing neighborhoods with features such as sidewalks, trails, parks, schools, community gardens, and other gathering spaces to promote opportunities for interaction and strengthen a sense of community, end quote. So there's an example of how that flows within the document. Chapter 3 is divided into 4 areas. The first area is the community's framework. The plan looks at influencing factors such as population growth, growth boundaries, housing supply and needs, commercial and employment gaps and needs, and takes a balanced approach to growth using infill and redevelopment, as well as greenfield development on the periphery. We definitely, as a community, see both of those things happening. The second area within chapter 3 is intensification and tiered growth plan. The plan creates a three tiers of growth boundaries in a concentrical pattern moving outward from the city center and an intensification area in the core of the city that incentivizes development. And we're going to talk more about this concept shortly. Section 3 of chapter 3 is the land use plan. This is where you'll find the land use map, or the future land use map, as we're so most familiar with. This section describes the 9 future land use categories, as well as how to use the plan and amend the plan. Each land use category looks at a range of density, specific characteristics of the land use category. Primary and secondary land use is permitted, and the implementing zone districts for each land use category. As you might recall, those that were on the commission in March, we talked about how from the 2010 plan to the proposed 2020 plan that we're really looking at reducing the number of overall land use designations or categories. And we're down to 9 with really, when you look at the slide here, you can see the land use categories. Really, there's 3 that really deal with residential head-on, residential low, residential medium, residential high, with a rural residential, which we'll talk more about here later, as kind of that 4th residential district. In the 4th, excuse me, area in chapter 3 is talking about servicing growth. This section addresses the service needs of Grand Junction and looks at capacity requirements and levels of service targets, and including all the various utility services, from domestic water down to public schools, libraries, parks, and open space. Then we get into chapter 4, which is where we look at area-specific policies. This chapter includes the 2 sub-areas that we did with HLA, our consultant team, last fall, where we conducted planning exercises with the public and looking at 24 Road and Lower Downtown. So that those 2 sub-areas are within chapter 4, as well as area-specific policies. And a little more about that. While the plan principles and policies in chapter 2 guide decision-making affecting the city as a whole, the area-specific policies here in chapter 4 guide the desired use, characteristics, and form of development in specific locations within the city. The policies and recommendations apply to specific areas within the following land use designations: commercial, mixed use, and industrial. And in each of those, there are design principles that are incorporated, including these 7 listed there. And we're going to talk today as well more about the area-specific policies and the maps that are included in the plan that address those areas. Chapter 5, obviously any good master plan is going to also have a good implementation plan. This chapter contains strategies to help support the implementation of the plan through 2040. It is a tool to guide the City Council's strategic plan, department level strategic plans and work programs, capital improvement planning, the city's budgeting process, and the allocation of staff time and other city resources. The strategies are organized by each of the 11 plan principles that found in chapter 2. Which again, we'll talk more about that here shortly. It also talks about timeframes or anticipated timeframes for completion of the implementation strategy. And it divides those into a near term, which is already underway or to be initiated within 6 months to a year after the plan adoption, or short term, to be initiated within 1 to 3 years after plan adoption. Long term, to be initiated within 3 or more years after plan adoption. And then all of the ongoing implementation strategies to be implemented by city staff as part of their routine job duties. Excuse me. Obviously, any implementation plan also looks at the need for resources truly are required and are identified. And these include regional collaboration, really trying to collaborate and partner with all the various agencies we have in our community, like Mesa County, District 51, fire districts, our Regional Transportation Planning Office, and many others. In some cases, strategies will be initiated by the city. In other cases, strategies reflect ongoing partnerships or initiatives that the city is already engaged in. Another resource, outside support funding. Some strategies will require outside support or other specialized services to supplement staff time and expertise. This could be achieved either through outside grants or other sources of funding or through the dedication of city resources. Obviously, another resource is staff time and the general fund and other funds that we might be able to secure or apply for and secure. And also looking at other sources of funding like special revenue funds, enterprise funds, et cetera. And then there's the capital improvement plan, which is really important because revenues from all the city's funds are used to support capital projects and the implementation of the city's CIP. And that definitely rolls right from the comprehensive plan and the priorities and how we implement it. And then the final chapter is chapter 6. It's really in the appendices. The appendices are divided into 4 areas: Appendix A, B, C, and D, as you can see there on the screen. Everything from listing the reports and plans the city has completed that remains active and inform the comprehensive plan. Those are mentioned in the plan. There's in B, there's the technical maps that inform the plan. And then C is a summary of the public process and outreach for the comprehensive plan. And then Appendix D is a list that our consultant team put together, potential funding sources and programs the city and the community can tap into for future projects. So it's a kind of an exhaustive list of what's out there for potential funding. And as we move forward and are looking to implement a particular project, with any luck, maybe one of those funding sources would be key to making that happen. So any questions on, before we move on kind of to our next topic area in regards to kind of the layout, kind of what's in the plan from 30,000 feet?
Dave, this is Christian. I don't have a question on the comp plan, but if I remember correctly, in 2010, right around the time when we were doing the last comp plan, we also reviewed the circulation plan. And I just wonder if that will be a part of this review at some point in the near future.
Great question. So we updated the circulation plan even after the 2010 plan in 2018. And so it's pretty fresh. Our functional classification map is at this point, I think is pretty tight. And remember in 18, we also added our complete streets directive, as well as the active transportation corridor map, which has been super useful and continues to be useful in trying to create a much more multimodal transportation system. There are some things I think we could probably identify if we were to dive into that map to build to amend, but we're looking at that as being more of a follow-up to the comprehensive plan, and we're referencing the 2018 plan for the circulation plan in this plan as being an important piece of what we do for transportation.
Thank you for that reminder. I apparently did not remember looking over the circulation plan, though I can confirm I was fully engaged.
Sounds great. Thanks for your question. Anybody else have any questions as far as kind of the layout of the 6 chapters before we move on? All right, moving on. So this slide here that you see on your screen just restates those 11 plan principles. Again, these are ones that we've had around now for 6 months in the sense of where we've vetted them in the spring, and we've been building the comprehensive plan around these plan principles over the last 6 months as the plan's been written. In your packet today, you should have seen a 4-page kind of handout, at least electronic handout, that has the 11 plan principles on them, and it further includes the goals directly out of the draft plan that the CPAC is currently reviewing as a complete document. But we included those goals under each of the plan principles. So I thought it might be, I'm hoping you had a chance to at least glance through these. If not, I just wanted to take a real kind of cursory just run through on kind of big picture of what the goals are in the sense of trying to realize and have our principles upheld in our community. Under collective identity, really it's about preserving, promoting, and celebrating the identity, diversity, and history of our community. And it's a smaller section, but and only one draft goal, but obviously very important. Number 2, resilient and diverse economy. Clearly, we heard this a lot in our public input. The need to continue to grow our economy, to make sure we're resilient and diverse and vibrant. That we, the education needs of employers in the sense of employees, and promoting business growth, and making sure we have all of the parts. You can see here there's goals regarding the tourism industry, marketing Grand Junction, visit Grand Junction, and working with the strategic partners there, and investing in key infrastructure that supports business. Number 3, responsible and managed growth. Looking at really supporting the fiscally responsible growth and annexation policies and patterns. Trying to improve our level of service even more than we have today, encouraging that efficient use of land. As you might remember, and the public outreach, there was a lot of desire to grow within, do more infill and redevelopment. But at the same time, we know that we're going to have pressures to grow outward. So try to do that responsibly. Build and maintain infrastructure that supports urban development, making sure we're sizing things correctly, and not just the city, but all utility companies. So they hopefully will see what the city has planned for areas and build accordingly. Make sure that we're delivering our city services and infrastructure responsibly fiscally, supporting development of neighborhood-centered community commercial uses and mixed-use development, continuing our efforts to create a community with a sense of arrival, attractive design, and well-maintained properties. I think for the 30 years I've been here, we've always felt that need to make sure we're beautifying our entrances to our community, and that is continued into this planning effort as well. The fourth one, downtown and university districts. This is really trying to help grow our downtown, much like we did for the 2010 plan, where a lot of emphasis in 2010 is to grow downtown, grow the city center. We've defined it a little differently in 2020. It's downtown in the university area around CMU, trying to convert energetic and a livable greater downtown and university area and balancing the needs of residents, the students, visitors, and everyone really. Strengthening that multimodal connection between the two. There's been a lot of frustration, I think, from people of not feeling like the connection is as good as it could be. Promoting the continued reinvestment into downtown, but also the extension of downtown into lower downtown with the riverfront, the rail and university districts, economy, and kind of building that environment around each of those areas. Number 5, strong neighborhoods and housing choices is one of our plan principles. You can see there that there's 5 goals that really look at housing choice, developing housing strategies, supporting investment in ongoing maintenance of infrastructure and amenities, promoting the integration of transportation mode choices into and through neighborhoods, and then fostering the development of neighborhoods where people of all ages, incomes, and backgrounds live together and share a feeling of community. 6 is our transportation principle, efficient and connected. It looks at, the goals look at developing a safe, balanced, and well-connected transportation system for all modes. Managing that transportation system and infrastructure for reliability, efficiency, and safety. Facilitating the movement of goods and services, that's through truck, air, and rail. Encouraging the use of transit, bicycling, walking, and other forms of transportation, and anticipating and planning for opportunities associated with whatever's thrown at us in the future, from connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, drones, mobility as a service, and electric vehicles. All the things that we're dealing with now and may deal with in the future. Especially the drones. Who knows where that's going, right? Number 7, great places and recreation opportunities is the 7th principle. There's 5 goals under this principle where we want to really provide a safe and accessible network of parks and open space and trails. That's really been hit home by many, many people to ensure that we have all these facilities, recreational facilities that meet the community's needs, and that there's an equity of location. When you look at where parks are, there are areas that are a little more of a desert when it comes to having access to a park. We want to make sure we foster opportunities to bring people together, support a lively arts and culture community, and maintain access to our public lands are a very important part of our outdoor recreation goals and just what we do here, right? Number 8, resources stewardship. Again, 5 goals here, promoting water conservation, water quality, sustainable development, waste reduction practices. We want to have some conservation and sustainability efforts to achieve improved public and environmental health. We want to make sure we have preservation of our unique assets, such as riparian, recreation, wild areas, and wildlife habitat. And we want to make sure we're managing the city's urban forests in a water-wise landscaping way. Number 9, quality education facilities. We want to support high quality and accessible education system. Education landed as one of our 11 principles due to really our work with District 51 and their desire to be a part of the conversation. We want to support the district in ensuring there's adequate facilities and infrastructure for the community, and support community-based education. And that also includes Mesa County libraries. Want to make sure that the infrastructure and facilities are there for city residents, and that there's an ability to have a knowledge of available services so people know where they can go to learn and to be educated. Number 10, safe, healthy, and inclusive community. That's we have 4 goals there dealing with public safety and emergency response, public health and wellness, We want to make sure we foster a culture of inclusivity. Boy, that's a good one, huh? Inclusiveness, how's that? Embracing and respecting the diversity of Grand Junction's residents is really what it's about. We want to promote a safe and more resilient community. And then the last one is effective in having a transparent government. And we have 5 goals there where we want to align day-to-day decision-making and budgeting with the implementation of the plan. We want to provide opportunities for meaningful and inclusive community involvement. We want to seek opportunities to increase the efficiency of our facilities and effectiveness of programs and services. We want to collaborate with local, regional, and state partners on issues of mutual significance. And we want to develop and support leadership that reflects the diversity of the community. So I kind of ran through those fairly quickly. Any thoughts or comments on the plan, principles, and goals?
This is Ken. I have a couple of comments. On number 6, transportation, you have a nice list of some of the newer and futuristic modalities. I would consider adding e-bikes to that list because they're already here, and there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts about, you know, how they should be used, where they can be used, etc. On number 7, I don't see anything about organized sports. To me, that I think that's a big player, obviously, in town with JUCO and all the tournaments out at Canyon View, tennis tournaments, et cetera, which is different than outdoor rec, but I think it belongs in the same category. So I think a line about growing, supporting, et cetera, organized sports is appropriate. And then on number 8, I think a line, however you want to phrase this to not get into some sort of political thing, but I don't think we need to keep our heads in the sand about the fact that there's a changing climate and environment that's affecting us severely, and maybe something about a strategy, a comprehensive strategy to be resilient or mitigate, or whatever language you want to word, something about dealing with being resilient and proactive about the changing climate. That's all.
Hey, thank you. Anybody else have a question or thought?
Davis, the comprehensive plan in print form yet?
It's yes, it's in PDF, or it can be printed. It's we have it in front of our CPAC, and so our process is such that we're asking for their input, and then we'll write following changes made after their input. We will launch
copies available for us yet?
I think, Tim, we want to jump in, but I think the goal was to have you look at a copy after CPAC had a chance to go through it, and we can make changes based on their input.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Sam. And that's exactly correct, as David indicated. Is the intent is that the CPAC, they have the draft in hand. Some of them have hard copies, and they'll spend the next couple weeks reviewing it and providing feedback. And we'll talk a little bit about the next steps. So I think you beat us to the punch there a little bit. And then I just wanted to circle back on Ken's all great comments. And I think you'll be, this doesn't drill down to the next layer, but all of those issues and topics that you pointed out are certainly ones that we heard throughout the public process. And they are addressed as strategies in the plan. So it sounds like we've captured those thoughts, which is great to hear.
Okay, thanks. I wondered about that, but I just wanted to bring them up. Thank you.
Tamara?
Mr. Wade?
I assume then that some deeper discussion of potential affordable housing options is going to be down in the strategies as well?
Yeah, great question. It is in the strategies, and we actually are making some inroads in that priority policy direction right now. I think the strategy, and I don't have the verbatim text here, but definitely talks about the need to identify through a housing study, community needs, and then specifically for the city to develop a strategy for participation in housing here within the community. So that strategy is very clearly stated in the plan, and certainly welcome when you have the text in hand to make sure that any thoughts you have on that specifically share with us.
Thank you.
All right, anything else before we move on to the next screen? So I promised earlier that we would take a look at some of the parts of the plan that I mentioned in the overview. The first is the intensification and tiered growth map. This really helps inform the next slide we'll look at, which is the actual proposed future land use map, which has all the 9 categories or designations. As you look at this, I'll try to explain this map. So you have tier 1, which is really urban infill, and it's an area that we've been growing for the last 3 decades, really. And so you have within that, you have first off, you have an area that's called an incentive area, which is an intensification area, and it's the area that was identified with the work that City Council did in revising the TCP ordinance last fall. And in conjunction with that, it was identified for an area where there's incentive, at least from a TCP savings standpoint for development. If they locate within that area and if new development is done within that area, then there's a reduction in TCP fees. And so there may be other things in the future that we would want to look at, but for now we do have that as an incentive. But that's the boundary that's is depicted here on this map as being an area of intensification that's been established previously by City Council, at least for the TCP ordinance. Then you have the kind of the gray area of tier 1 here, and then tier 2 and tier 3. The tier 3 being the darker. Call that green, but you all know I'm colorblind. So I'll say dark green and light green. How's that? And so the light green being the area that is tier 2, and then the area of tier 3 is out further out in the outer reaches, an area that we don't really anticipate needing to grow in the next 10 to 20 years based on the projected growth that we are anticipating, the 24,000 additional people between now and 2040. We think that they can be accommodated, generally speaking, within this tier 1 and even into tier 2 area for the next 20 years. And so tier 3 kind of sets up an area that is really beyond the 20-year planning horizon, but still within the city's urban development boundary, and an area that we want to make sure that we don't lose track of, because if all of a sudden things speed up and we're growing a lot faster than what the state demographer is projecting us to grow at, which is 1.1%, we may move out there quicker than 20 years. But even if it's after the 20 years, obviously the city won't stop growing in 2040. And so this would look at those areas to be reserved for future growth beyond 2040. Tammy, do you have anything you want to add to that, Matt?
David, Andrea wanted an explanation of TCP.
You bet. Transportation capacity payment. It's basically it's an impact fee for new development based on their impact to area community roads. In the sense of as we add more traffic on our roads, then additional new traffic is only increasing the level of service on roads and the potential need for road widenings or road improvements such as dedicated right turn lanes or left turn lanes, stoplights, those kinds of things that might be required as a result of additional traffic over time being introduced to our community. So new development pays their portion, or at least a portion of that based on the TCP ordinance to help for future improvements.
Great, thank you for clarifying that.
All right. Anything you wanted to add on this one, Tamara?
No, thanks, Dave. I think you covered it pretty well. I might pause here though and see if anybody else has questions about the map or the related concepts.
Okay, hearing none, I think I'll move to next slide. So here's the future land use map. Probably the most anticipated map of this whole plan by members of the public. I constantly get emails and phone calls about, is that map ready? So I think it'll be well used here in a couple weeks after we've launched it to the public. So remember the tiers. You can see up here in the north, for example, up here basically north of about H.5. Here's about H.5 road, and this is close. Here's I road here, so getting closer to I road. This area of tier 3, as well as the tier 3 that you saw in the kind of central Orchard Mesa area, the area between about 30.5 road or 30.25 road and 31 road, this kind of 3/4 of a mile wide width of land here running north and south from Highway 50 to the river. Those are the two large areas of the tier 3 and the tier 3, and the tier 3 also includes some areas on the Redlands. So they pretty much match up with what is shown here on the future land use map is rural residential. So under the rural residential, you'll find in the proposed language of the plan is that the land use or the zone district that would implement that land use is RR, residential rural. So in a sense, it's preserving that area as rural for now over the next 20 years. With the if a landowner in those areas wanted to have something different than rural, then they would need to request an amendment to the comprehensive plan, and have to be able to demonstrate why the urban intensity and density is needed in that area. To basically, in summary, anyway. So there you have those kind of rural areas. Everything else is urban density. So to give you a little background on the types of densities, rural residential low is 1 acre lot or 1 acre R1 to R5, which is 5.5 units per acre. So R1, R2, R4, and R5 would be implementing districts, zoning districts for our residential low. That's the kind of light yellow. You have residential medium, which is 5.5 to 12 units per acre. So that would be an R8 or an R12 under our current zoning. And then there's residential high, which would be R16 or R24. And and then looking at the non-residential districts, we have commercial, industrial, and airport. Again, we've reduced the number from our current plan. Right now, as you might recall, we have commercial, industrial that goes away. So really, we've packed it into a commercial, industrial, those two, with airport being the airport. So the airports doesn't really change. It's everything that's zoned PAD, and that's the implementing district from the zoning code. And then we have parks and open space, which have been identified throughout the community as a land use category as well. Any quick questions on that?
Dave, I have a question. I don't know if it's quick.
Okay.
Okay. Is there approximately about the same amount of industrial in this future land use map as there was in the previous future land use map?
Great question. You know, I can't give you the acreage to acreage comparison, but I can tell you that it's pretty much following the same. You know, the area that's somewhat changed is an area that, as you know, as Planning Commission, more recently the community, those 5 pods out here between 23.5 road and 24 road. as a mixed use area that has the ability to be kind of more commercial or heavier commercial all the way to residential. So in a sense, we've already changed that to a more of a mixed use area, which if you look, and that was done knowing that we were potentially reducing some of the overall industrial land that could be available long-term for the community. Other than that area, I think everything else pretty much matches up with the industrial that you will find on our current future land use map and our future land use and our current comprehensive plan. But again, this area honoring the more recent zoning decisions that were done.
And then sorry, go ahead, Tamara.
That's right. I was gonna add a little bit to that too. One of the differences in this plan when you're talking about the context of industrial is that in the 2010 plan, much of the industrial areas were also designated commercial. So they were commercial and commercial/industrial. And so it gave I think a broader range of zoning categories that were ultimately applicable if there was a rezone or something of that nature to come in. What this does is actually, I think, do a maybe better job of preserving some of the industrial areas for actual industrial uses versus kind of incremental encroachment for a variety of commercial type of uses. I think one of those areas especially brings focus, certainly the community hospital area there, I think Dave already highlighted, but up in the Northwest area too, that I think has really solidified in this plan as really an area of industrial use looking forward to future designations.
Do we, when we're evaluating, what percentage of the urban development of the land within the urban development boundary is industrial or commercial or, fill in the blank, is there like a rule of thumb that comparable cities use to say, a healthy city should have 12% of its land designated industrial or something like, because one of our approval criteria that I think has since been modified, but it used to be there an insufficient amount of suitably designated land within the city, and that's really hard to determine when we don't know what percent of that zoning or that type of land designation is appropriate for the community.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's kind of two parts to that. Maybe I'll hit the first one, which is there a kind of standard or a best practices for the ratio of industrial property to a community? And to my knowledge, no. And I would say that there's a huge delta or difference between all communities, frankly, that I'm aware of. And one of the concepts just jumped into my brain here, especially as we so recently and continue to talk about marijuana, is, I use, for example, the city and county of Denver, who had at one point a very significant inventory of industrial buildings and warehousing. But, when you bring a use like marijuana in, they occupy a lot of that. And so even though it's still a kind of an industrial use, it's really hard to find some kind of a comparison on what the ratio is that's important, especially if you're thinking of more of a manufacturing industrial like type of use. So I just throw that in there as kind of an interesting maybe aside. But I think, Christian, to your point, no, there's not I think a specific recipe or best practices, at least that I'm aware of, that kind of dictates a ratio per se. And there's, I think, lots of variables that play into that for various reasons and values, and desirability by different industries to occupy space. That said, I think the conclusion that we drew from this planning process is really the importance to this community to help protect industrial lands for industrial purposes. And that's what this future land use attempts to do, is really recognize that value. Those were things that we heard throughout the planning process, certainly heard strongly from, I think, our economic development partners, both at the Chamber and GGEP, that is really critical to make sure that there is land set aside that aren't encroached in and don't have to deal with some of the compatibility issues that that could be challenging for industrial type of development. So that was really the attempt herein.
Thank you.
Did you have any additional question on that, Christian? Did we answer all your question there?
No, I don't. I think that cleared it up. I think on the old future land use map, industrial is a different color, and it is very bright and prominent on this map. So that's what caused me to ask, you know, is there more? Is there less? Because it was a more muted color on the old map, and on this map, it's the most prominent color to me. So I just had that question, and I think it's important that we have industrially zoned parcels, but I also have seen some of these industrially zoned parcels with for sale signs sitting in there for 10 years now. And I think that there's a time and a place for some flexibility in what actually gets developed in those areas, so that we're not sitting here 20 years from now with for sale signs still in the property north of Community Hospital waiting to be developed industrially. So that was kind of the crux of why I was asking some of those questions.
Perfect. You know, I won't say there weren't some tweaks to the boundary. And if you were to overlay the 2010 plan on top of the 2020 plan, there's going to be maybe some minor changes here and there. But generally speaking, as Tamara mentioned, protection of the industrial was an important aspect of this. All right. Anything else on the future land use map before we move on? Okay. So now I had mentioned, again, I gave you a sneak peek on the overview earlier in this presentation, chapter 4, looking at some area specific policies. So this is the chapter, you might recall me saying that it has the two sub areas, the 24 road and the lower downtown, as well as some area specific policies looking at commercial, industrial, and mixed use. So these three land use designations, and then under each one of them, there's some policy areas that are looked at in the plan. There's employment center, regional center, and corridor under the commercial. Under the industrial, we have airport services, general, and rail. And then under mixed use, we have policy areas of corridor, neighborhood center, and downtown core, as well as riverfront and university as part of those 5 different areas of policy areas under the mixed use. So that's kind of how the hierarchy is set up in the plan. And there's as well, there's 3 maps, 1 map for commercial, 1 map for industrial, 1 map for mixed use. So first looking at the commercial area specific, what's shown on here is all of the commercial areas that are from the future land use map, or from the land use map that's commercial, so all the red on the map. And then there's some additional the regional center, employment, and commercial corridors that are identified. So you have like the North Avenue corridor, you have a regional center around Mesa Mall and 24 Road, as well as Horizon Drive, and a future one up at the 29 Road interchange. Not knowing when that will happen, but still being planned for. And then there's employment centers such as St. Mary's here that you can see on the map, as well as Community Hospital and Forsyth Park that were identified on here. And then the map also shows other areas that are identified as commercial on the future land use map, which would be areas like the DOE compound down here by the Gunnison River, as well as some neighborhood center mixed use areas out here on the Redlands and scattered around our community. So that's the commercial area specific. And again, just as a reminder, area specific policies regarding design principles will include these various design principles. And all 6 of these are found within the section of the plan that deals with commercial areas. Similar situation for mixed use. So here's the mixed use map. It's also identified by a point, a spot on the map for neighborhood center. So the plan identifies various neighborhood centers. Many of these are existing neighborhood centers. For example, 29 Road and Patterson, 29 and Patterson, you've got Safeway. You have Monument Village Shopping Center out here that used to have a Safeway out on the Redlands. You have Orchard Mesa. There's some new ones that have been identified based on public input. We heard a lot from the community about wanting neighborhood centers and those basic shopping needs close to where they live. And your guess is as good as mine as it comes to bricks and mortar and retail development of the future, with online sales becoming more and more prevalent in our lives. But clearly we wanted to make sure we allowed for those neighborhood centers and mixed use centers to occur in a little different format than what we did with our current 2010 plan. We've downplayed it a little bit from the last plan, and we've identified many of these areas, but we've eliminated village centers and made them just mixed use or neighborhood centers. Again, there's 7 different design principles that are talked about within this section of the mixed use areas. And you can see some areas of mixed use identified, like kind of the core of downtown, and then mixed use corridors out here on along D Road, or Riverside Parkway, I should say, and 29 Road, with the property that's owned by CMU, as well as the state property and some other privately owned properties out there. And then really looking at the area here, 24 Road between F&a-half Road Parkway and G Road, as being a mixed use corridor area. That the plan has some language talking about that. And then the third map being the industrial areas. And on here you can see we have, again, all the future land use designation of industrial is shown here on the map in the purple. We've identified some rail areas where we have rail spurs. There's rail spurs that go into the Railhead commercial industrial park out here. Also some here along the Riverside Parkway, just east of the Redlands Parkway. And then of course, I think we're all familiar with the fact that you've got the big yard right down kind of in our downtown with the railroad, and there's spurs that access several properties in this area. And as part of this planning effort, we want to make sure that these are recognized, identified, and they're preserved, with a rail spur being an important piece to transporting large quantities of goods and service, large quantities of goods. So we want to make sure that we haven't left those out. There's 7 different design principles within this section that you'll find in the text of the plan. So with that, I think any questions on any one of those 3 areas?
Thanks, Dave. Great presentation.
Thank you. So we got industrial, mixed use, and commercial. And obviously, as you read through the plan, eventually, when you get a copy of it, it'll make even more sense. But this is kind of a high-level overview of it for you. All right. Tamara, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I didn't. I think that covers, like Dave said, a fairly high level review, but really wanted to introduce you guys to some of the bigger concepts in the plan. And certainly you will, in due time, have your own copy of the plan to take a look at, and certainly welcome your guys' review and feedback. Dave, do you want to stop and talk just generally about next steps in the process?
Yeah, you bet. as mentioned, we've given CPAC a couple of weeks to review and provide us comments. So we're asking for their comments to us no later than Friday, October 23rd. That'll get, then we'll take a big chunk of the following week working with our consultant team to change various things that might need to be changed as a result of the comments we receive. So we're anticipating kind of a final plan available for public review and also planning commission review late October. So probably I'm hoping by the 30th of October, which is a Friday. So that's kind of my target date at this point, and hoping to have this all wrapped up to keep things on a very, very tight schedule. Our hope we're looking at a open house for both on online and in-person open house during the course of a week over a couple of different days, where one day we'd have an online open house and a different day in person. We're looking at mid-November. We're trying to nail that timing down with Hauser Levine and Associates and their calendar. I don't have a specific date, but we're shooting for kind of mid-November for that, early to mid. And then I think we have on the calendar, Tamara, on November 16th, at least tentatively, a joint workshop with City Council, and we would invite you, Planning Commission, to attend that, and we would workshop the comp plan with both of you, the City Council and Planning Commission together, all in anticipation of if we can manage to keep this train on the track that's going full speed ahead. We're hoping to get this in front of you on November 24th for adoption, recommendation of adoption, and in City Council on December 16th. So that is a very aggressive timeline, obviously. We're hoping that we've spent enough effort these last 6 months to get this thing pretty darn close, where there's not a lot of changes from the public that we didn't realize or hadn't heard. And with any luck, we can maintain this schedule. Anything to add, Emma?
No, thanks. Maybe I would just underscore that that's the target schedule right now, but should we hear something during the CPAC review here the next couple of weeks, or during the open house that we had anticipated that we need to take a little bit more time with, certainly we will do so. Similarly, if we hear something from you all as Planning Commission or City Council that needs to be tweaked, we will wrap that in. We do hope that what you ultimately will see as the plan is really reflective of what we've heard from the community. And I know a number of you guys have participated in earnest, and we appreciate that during the public process and the open houses and community workshops. So we do think that this plan is really reflective of what we've heard, but we'll certainly look to you guys to hopefully confirm that, and certainly first to the CPAC to provide any edits or other comments that we need to adjust and incorporate into the draft plan here.
All right, that's all I had, unless you have any last questions.
That's it. You guys are letting us off easy today. So there's a lot here. And just to reinforce again what Dave said, we're really hopeful that we'll get through the CPAC review. We certainly anticipate edits. We hope that they'll be relatively minor, but if they're not, we'll adjust accordingly. And that then would be the segue into public open house. Certainly we'll make that document available to you guys as well. But really hope through that open house process, again, if there's anything else that we have not properly captured or need to review, we will do so, and then revamp our final document for both you and the you are the Planning Commission, City Council, to really take into consideration for ultimate adoption.
Tamara, I have a question. Is there are there areas where you would have liked to have received more feedback or more information that you felt maybe you didn't hear from as much as you were hoping?
That's a really good question. And I'll look to Dave or even to Lance here too, if you're still with us. My first response is no. I think we did we've heard a lot. I will say maybe one of the first pieces of this plan is pretty broad. And it covers a lot of areas that our planning documents generally haven't covered, but that's in direct response to what we heard in the community process and especially in the community vision workshop. So a little different route than a kind of more traditional kind of land use based document. But we're really pleased with how I think that's taken form. One fear is always, are we wrapping in too much? On the other hand, it's like, I think this is what the community's heard. So feel really confident that we've captured most of that, if hopefully not all of that. But we'll leave that certainly to our CPAC and you guys to make sure we haven't missed any big picture items for sure. Yeah, I feel like we've gotten a really good representation. I think that some of the questions that linger in my mind is whether we've had sufficient outreach to some of our either our non-English speaking community or some of our other groups that aren't traditionally represented. We did make a pretty big push at the end of the outreach program to really try to reach out specifically to our Latino and Hispanic community. So, we might not have seen those faces amongst us in the bigger crowds, but certainly I think made a really active and concerted effort to get to them, to kind of meet them where they're at and hear what their concerns are. And I think we've done a good job of trying to wrap those concepts and issues into the plan as well. So.
Do you feel like you heard, I know at the beginning of all of this, there was concern about using the web format for like the initial scoping and whether or not seniors would engage with that. Do you feel like you've gotten sufficient feedback from, and I don't want to be offensive, but I think like senior is technically 65 plus according to AARP. So do you feel like you've gotten enough from that population?
I think so. And Dave, and I was going to say, I'm already getting invites to AARP, so hopefully they have a lower age.
They might be 50.
I know.
Which still.
Yeah, Dave, would you like to jump in?
Sure, you bet. I absolutely, I feel really good about the age variety of ages that we heard from. When you look at the online, it was all through the different cohorts of age, from young to old. We did a lot of outreach even to the middle school kind of level and high school level. And so from a planning process perspective, I don't know if we could have really nailed it any better as far as pretty even percentages across the board. Now, the older crowd, a lot of them may not, some of them were the ones that came to a lot of the in-person stuff. And so if you were to just gauge the population's age from those events, you'd probably find that, oh, gee, it's mostly over 50 crowd. But we had a lot of input that we were using in this entire planning process from those that didn't necessarily come to the in-person, but were participating online. So I think doing both was a real plus.
Thank you. Tamara, Google says a senior citizen is 55.
Well, I just got a little early notice then, a constant reminder that I've got more birthdays coming up. If I'm so lucky. So great questions there, Christian. Thank you for those. Any other questions? All right, well, seeing none, like I said, we really wanted to walk you through this. We can certainly do some more deep dives should we need to once you have the plan in hand. But like I said, anticipate that here in the next month, if not a little bit sooner, for it to be publicly available, which we're really quite excited about. So I don't have any additional information, but we'll turn to Chairman Tusky to see if there's anything before we conclude today.
I don't have anything.
Well, thank you. Just from a scheduling standpoint, hopefully you all saw that our regular meeting for next Tuesday, we don't have an agenda, so that has been canceled. So we'll meet again, the next format in another workshop prior to our, I think it's October 27th Planning Commission meeting. And we definitely have a handful of agenda items already queued up for that. So if there's nothing else, we'll see you again on Zoom in 2 weeks.
Have a great day, everybody.
Sounds great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.